I'm so nervous to film this because I've never done anything like this on my channel before. YOLO. So I mentioned in my last video that I wanted to do some sort of like film related video. And this actually comes from, I basically watched Ashley from Best Dressed. I'll link the video below. I watched that video and I really liked it because she's a UCLA film school graduate. She has a really big insight on Hollywood and kind of understands a lot of things that the average person doesn't. I really liked her review on this film. Hers was very much a review, and I'm doing more of a dissection. But anyways, her video inspired me to make this. On Monday, September 2nd, I went to go see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
To my right is Bounty Law series lead and Jake Cahill himself, Rick Dalton. And to my left is Rick's stunt double Cliff Booth.
I wanted to go see this while I was still in California because that's when it was released, but because of just scheduling issues, I wasn't able to go see it, which is why this video is coming so late. I love Tarantino's films. He's a controversial man, I'll give you guys that. So I was really excited when Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out because he hasn't released a film in a few years. This has been in the works for a really long time, and there was a lot of controversy surrounding the film. A lot of people had a lot to say before even seeing the film, which I thought was wild because how can you even say something if you haven't even seen it? Like, you're not even judging a book by its cover at this point. You're literally speculating and forming opinions based on literal rumors. There was also a lot of controversy surrounding what had been shown at Cannes Film Festival. Apparently somebody on Wikipedia leaked the ending, and so they had to kind of rejig the ending. Again, nobody knows how true this is. Nobody's willing to confirm or deny whether or not this is true. I'm kind of curious. If the rumors are true, I would really like to see the Cannes ending and might actually just have to buy the DVD just so that I can double check. Might be a waste of money. I don't know. Anyways, so after all of this, like, pre-release controversy, the film came out and a lot of people just did not understand it. It's a very star-studded movie. There's so many big names like Al Pacino, Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie. It was a really interesting kind of mix of actors, and basically I'm going to summarize the movie. So if you have not seen it and you would like to see it without spoilers, I highly suggest leaving this video now. I have warned you. If you're still here, hello. So Once Upon a Time in Hollywood follows the story of Rick Dalton, who is played by Leonardo DiCaprio, Cliff Booth, who is played by Brad Pitt, and Sharon Tate, who is played by Margot Robbie. I don't know much about the golden era of Hollywood. I knew that I studied TV and radio, so I know that westerns are a big thing, and Rick Dalton, or Leonardo DiCaprio's character, is a western actor. What I didn't understand was that he isn't a real person, and neither is Cliff Booth. However, Sharon Tate is very real. So basically the story follows mostly Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth's relationship, friendship, employment, like bromance type. It's not even a bromance. A lot of people were talking about it as a bromance. It wasn't really. Cliff Booth is Rick Dalton's stunt double and friend, and like he maintains Rick Dalton's house, he does his errands, he drives him around. He's kind of like Rick Dalton's PA, like really. He doesn't really do stunts, he kind of screwed that up. Basically, Rick Dalton is a struggling actor. He was very big in the Western scene. His career is kind of coming to an end, like he's not getting cast in as many things, he's just not new and up and coming anymore. He's not what the people really want to see anymore. So he's kind of going through like an identity crisis. But by some luck, Sharon Tate and her new husband, Roman Polanski, move in next door. Sharon and Roman are two real people. Their characters are based on the real Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. A lot goes on. There's a lot of fluff, like nothing important. And Cliff Booth is repairing Rick Dalton's TV antenna. He like reminisces about like an altercation he had with Bruce Lee. Basically, that's how Cliff ended up not being a stunt double anymore, was that he had gotten in a fight with Bruce Lee on scene. He's also rumored to have murdered his wife. Anyways, while he's on the roof, Charles Manson, if you don't know who Charles Manson is, he's basically like a cult leader. He wanted to be a musician. While Cliff is on the roof, he notices Charles Manson walk up to the new Polanski household, and Roman answers the door, and he's looking for Terry Melcher, who was a music producer at the time. If you don't know much about the Manson history, basically Charles Manson wanted to be a singer, and he went to the music producer's house to address him directly, and it's assumed that he was gonna go to kill him. I don't know. So Sharon Tate goes out, she's like, who's this? And Roman Polanski is like, just some guy looking for the old owners of the house, blah blah blah, and whatever. A few scenes later, Cliff Booth is driving Rick Dalton's car, and he picks up a hippie girl from the side of the road that he had seen in passing before, and takes her to the Spawn TV ranch where the Manson family cult, whatever you want to call it, lived, which he didn't obviously know at the time. But he had shot at the Spawn ranch before, when him and Rick were in their prime. They shot there before, and he knows the owner. So he gets there, there's a bunch of hippie kind of whack looking people, and he goes, hey, can I see George? And they were like, how do you know George, blah blah blah. Eventually he gets to see George, asks him if he's okay. George is the owner of the ranch. He is very old, blind, probably a little bit senile. It seemed like he was a little bit senile. So Booth went to go check on him, say hey, I shot for you before. Are you being taken advantage of? Which kind of was, but he said no, and so Cliff left. As he was on his way out, he noticed that his tires, or Rick's tires, were slashed, and he asked who did it. Some shirtless, weird looking guy was like, it was me. Basically gets beaten up by Cliff because he's like, my boss don't like that. You're gonna fix the tire, but first I'm gonna kick your head in. So he beats the guy up. One of the girls goes to get Tex, the head rancher, who's played by Austin Butler, but by the time he gets back, the tire has already been fixed and Cliff is already on his way. At the same time, in the movie timeline, Sharon Tate goes to see her newest film, The Wrecking Crew. You just kind of see her in the theater, kind of observing other people's reactions to her film, just kind of admiring her work. Her feet are on the seat. So Rick gets on a new Western and has a breakdown and gets sent to Europe to do Spaghetti Ranchers, which is basically European/Italian directed Western project. And while he's there, he marries Francesca Capucci. Eventually his contract is done in Europe and he comes back to the States, and he can no longer afford to have Cliff Booth as his PA. So they go out on a final, night out and get mad drunk and reminisce about their lives together. At the same time, Sharon Tate, her friends, one of them is the heiress of Folgers Coffee, and then a few other people go out for dinner. Roman Polanski is in Europe shooting a film, so they go out for dinner. She's very, very pregnant, very uncomfortable, but is at the dinner anyway. They're just having a good time. They go home. Her and her neighbors, Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth, go home at around the same time. Cliff goes to walk his dog after smoking an acid cigarette, and Rick is in the house making margaritas. While he's making his margarita, he hears a really loud muffler noise, and goes out because he's in a private neighborhood. There shouldn't be any junky cars in this $1 million area. So he goes out, yells at the people in the car. What he doesn't know is that these are the Manson family, Manson clan followers. So he basically yells at people who are murderers, and they leave eventually and just kind of sit outside of the community. And one of them points out hey, that was Rick Dalton, blah blah blah. He taught us to kill, so we should kill him. This is where it kind of gets weird, because you kind of already know the story of how Sharon Tate passed away and her friends or whatever. You kind of know the story of how their lives ended, but they basically they walk up to the house. Not all of them went. One of the girls bailed out. And so Tex and two other girls go up to Rick Dalton's house. While they're walking in, Cliff had just gotten back, and he was high and super spaced out and was like, oh, I know you guys. And they were like, ah ha ha ha, laughing about it. And then Tex is pointing a gun at Cliff. And so Cliff gets his pit bull to go and attack him. Eventually, one by one, they all end up dead, and everybody survives. After that, Rick Dalton, he's outside, so one of the neighbors walks out. One of Sharon Tate's friends walk out and was like, hey, what's going on? And basically he was deemed a hero in their neighborhood, and nobody died except for the Manson followers. But that's not actually how the story ended. In real life, Sharon Tate was killed by the Manson family, and Charles Manson and his followers did get charged in her murder, as well as like her friends, her housemates or whatever. So basically you're kind of following the story of like old Hollywood and its end. From what I understand, you're kind of just like, Sharon Tate isn't like the main character. She's kind of more of a timeline and a symbol of the end of an era type of thing. It's rumored that because Tarantino is so fascinated by old Hollywood, he loved that era, whatever, that he wanted to write an alternate ending that resulted in the elongation of this era. And honestly, that makes sense. It's kind of poetic if you think about it. You know, it was a very unfortunate death. Like, Sharon Tate was 2 weeks away from giving birth to her son when she was stabbed to death, which is horrible. Like, you don't wish that on your worst enemy type of thing, right? Yeah, overall, like, when you really analyze it, it's a really beautiful rewrite of time. You know, Rick and Cliff's characters are based on real people, but like multiple real people. Like, they don't pinpoint one certain person. Rick Dalton is rumored to represent so many different Western Hollywood actors. Cliff Booth is actually rather interesting because it's rumored, like, in the movie they briefly mention a few times that he murdered his wife. He insists that he didn't, but he's supposed to be based on, but potentially Hal Needham. He was a stunt double, but that seems to be the only like historical resemblance that they have. Sharon was again like one of the rising stars in Hollywood at the time and had that ripped away from her. It's very like, she's very symbolic in terms of the timeline and of like what she could have been, what could have happened type of thing. And her body was actually discovered by the housekeeper who had been interrogated. Roman Polanski was interrogated in her murder, but he wasn't even in the country. And in the end, they found out that it was the Manson family, found their ranch, you know. It's pretty wild. Like, the whole Charles Manson story I had heard of before, just, it's disgusting. Why did the Mansons kill her was a question that I had when I first started getting into film and history in a certain way. And basically, from what I understand, she lived in the house of an old music producer, and I think that the Mansons would have wanted to kill the music producer, but since they didn't really know where he went, she's pretty much like the next best thing, like symbolically. Sharon Tate lived in the house at the time of Charles Manson's musical rejection, was the house of a music producer that rejected him. So it was more just like a symbolic like his thing, I think. So again, we've already talked about the ending, but you know, Sharon Tate did pass away in real life. What was the ending? And basically it's just a happier ending. Like, it's the ending that everybody at the time would have wanted. It's just a different take. It's a happier take. It's kind of a more peaceful, heroic type of thing. So now on to my opinion about the film. There was a lot of feet. There was a lot of feet. I knew that Quentin Tarantino liked feet. Most people know that, but I've never seen feet so prominent in one of his films before. There was, you know, Margot Robbie's feet on the seat. There was the little hippie girl's feet on the dashboard. But then when you first see the ranch in the house, there's like 10 pairs of feet like all over the room. You even get a foot perspective shot of the TV. It was just a lot, really. After that, it really died down, but for like the first half of the movie, there was a lot of feet. I liked the interesting mix of like fiction and reality, and you know, how they kind of intertwined. It's a different take on how Tarantino usually does his dual timeline, dual storyline films. If you've watched even like just Pulp Fiction, like one of his more popular movies, you know, it's two very different timelines that end up at the same spot. This was a very different way to do it because the two different timelines is the reality and the fiction, and I thought that was really cool. So like in the reality column, there's the ranch, the Manson family, Sharon Tate, and then Bruce Lee. There's a lot of criticism about Bruce Lee and his behavior in the film. That could be debated because, you know, Bruce Lee's family was like, this isn't real, this isn't Bruce, like this isn't how he acted. But Tarantino said the opposite, so I don't know. And then the fake is Cliff and Rick, who are representative of the whole kind of Western Hollywood scene, all of those like struggling, like fading out actors. All of the TV shows are fake. None of them actually happened, although it would be interesting to see them, and the ending, of course, is fake. It was also set to be released on the 50th anniversary of Sharon Tate's death, which I thought was very, symbolic of something. Even though the movie isn't about her, it's a good ode to, what happened. It's a good alternative ending, like it's a happy ending, 50 years later. I think it was just kind of supposed to be like a sentimental symbol of, her passing. I really liked the choice of the title, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's a fairy tale, really. Like, at the end, it's a fairy tale ending. It's a happy ending. And so that's where the Once Upon a Time comes in. I also really like that in one of Quentin's past movies, Inglourious Basterds, he starts it by Once Upon a Time. I thought that was, like, kind of an interesting detail. It actually also features Charles Manson's song. It's called I'll Never Say Never to Always. That is my overall analysis, dissection of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I really liked it. I think that it was beautifully shot, minus all of the feet things, but it was a confusing but very entertaining movie. It was a good movie. I don't think it's one of my favorite Tarantino movies, but it was still good. You could still see very much his personality and his, artistic direction in it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up and subscribe if you're new and enjoy these kind of like movie reviews. I want to do more of them. I just need to find movies that I'm actually like passionate about and care about enough to do. So yeah, anyways, I hope to see you guys next week, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.